there for years for one storm. I'm not exaggerating. So, and they'll do everything from, they'll build homeless shelters. I mean, he's literally been in charge of building a homeless shelter after a storm in the Panhandle. Yeah. So I guess there's all kind of subsidies or something you can get, but I personally have not had to, partake, fortunately. So.
Yeah, I saw somebody. I saw a piece on the news where somebody had lost their home, and across the street, they were still cleaning up from a hurricane from 2 years ago. It takes so long to get this stuff out and rebuild.
It's crazy. And there's a controversy because insurers had been leaving state of Florida, and when they're not there, the state takes care of it. And so you start to maybe, sometimes ask the question of, well, should we really be paying people to live in places that are not conducive to human life, that we know they'll just get blown down? So there's probably some kind of insurance. I don't know.
Yeah, that's happening here in California, where people are just, the insurers are bailing out of fire danger zones. They're just not insuring the house. I don't blame them. I mean, so how many losses can you take in? After a while, somebody rebuilds a house and it burns down. 3 years later, burns down again. After a while, you got to go, you know what? This is not a good business model.
Or we have things that are not covered. Like there's those landslides in Paso Robles, those entire neighborhoods that are like sliding off the side of the.
Yeah.
We're waiting for California to break off.
We're only going to lose like the last 20 feet. That's the thing. It's like not very much of the.
Right.
There's a shelf and it's only like 100 yards worth. Seriously, the rest of it's pretty attached. The last 100 yards, though, I don't know.
I thought Pete meant he's waiting for them to break off politically. I was like,
well, I mean, we would argue that, and there is a secessionist movement here.
John, we would never argue that.
I'm not entirely adverse to the idea.
That was good.
Yeah, but if we're the biggest, state,
it's getting old paying taxes supporting Alabama. So sorry, Alabama. Sorry,
is that our opening note tonight?
That's our opening note.
Our newest affiliate, Alabama. No, go on.
It's a good thing we're not live.
Oh, we're not yet.
Oh, we're not. Okay.
We are. I'll get letters.
Anthony,
I see the clock. Yeah.
Anthony, thank goodness you're alive. You made it through the hurricane. What's been going on in your technology room?
No, that's very kind of you. I'm not thinking of technology stories per se right now, but I did send you guys a bunch of news stories just before the program. I don't know. We got dyslexia, psychedelics, gut problems, and autism. I don't know if any of that sounds sexy. Nothing super clickbaity for you. No NFL, etc.
It's like the debate when they toss out so many discussion items that you can't end up answering because it's too many.
Exactly.
But the almost 70% of autism that ended up having GI problems is no surprise.
Right.
You have approximately that many percent that have epileptiform discharges, and all you have to do is involve the insula, which is easily sometimes the focus. So you end up with abdominal epilepsy, GI problems, and that's it's not part of the international classification system, but abdominal epilepsy is still recognized. You can punch it into the literature and find there are still publications about it. A fairly recent one from Italy in their neuroscience journal over there. But it's as you drop down the homunculus from the feet on the top down to the hands and then to the face, and then the tongue hangs out, and then as you dip into the sylvian fissure, the inside of the mouth, the pharynx, but as you get further in, the posterior insula is all of your gastrointestinal motility. The peristalsis is regulated with smooth muscle regulation from there. And if you have a discharge there, you don't have a striate muscle seizure, you have a smooth muscle spasm. It's quite painful to have a spasm in your intestines. So, and it's not an unusual spot for seizures to start and be triggered. Temporal lobe epilepsy quite often kindles from there. Our case that we published recently on Isabella, her aura was a kind of a distress, internal distress. And her seizure started in the left insula, spread on the left side, and then popped up on the right side with big voltage, which they were ready to cut out her right temporal lobe with the neurosurgery when the problem was actually a trigger on the left temporal, left insula. But, neurofeedback targeting the focus on that stopped her seizures. She's been seizure-free now over 7 years. Graduated with honors from Baylor, the 4-year tennis scholarship. She's getting her master's degree. She wanted the publication with her name named in the publication of her case because she's in communications and she wants to talk about neurofeedback for epilepsy. So anyway.
How do you know you got that in your gut versus like you had a bad piece of chicken? I'm not trying to be funny, but I just want to know that maybe I did.
There's, well, for you, it's probably a bad piece of chicken, what you have to do is actually look at the organ that you think might be generating it. And if you go to the GI person and they'll do testing, so you'll be scoped sometimes. They'll scope up one side and down the other. If they can't find something that way, you might actually consider looking at the insula to see whether there's a source there. Next week we've got Sassoon Summit, and Greg Charbonneau has a specific talk about GI complaints and the insula and neurofeedback success stories and a brand new referral pattern. He's receiving referrals from GI specialists who can't find stuff when they do scoping, and they want them to look at the head to see whether they find that funny thing that you find up in the head when you look, So
Jay, are you saying if you don't see anything looking down, look up? Kind of like in the horror films? Look at the
Sounds like he's talking about going bottom up versus top down.
But
it's an interesting topic, Jay, and thank you for really digging into that a little bit, because we just got a kid coming into the clinic who's about 10 years old, and the parents are, it's ADD, maybe it's autism. They're unsure. I don't know if they've done proper, sort of diagnostic criteria. I don't question it. Let's look at the QEEG. Lo and behold, the insula. Lo and behold, one of the symptoms is constipation. Bowel issues. They're not necessarily connecting it to his brain problems. I'm sure they're treating it with, over-the-counter medication, the junk that you get. Well, my kid's going to give him with Pepto-Bismol or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's the go-to, and nobody's looking at the brain issue. Turns out this kid has an undiagnosed, I can't use the word because I'm not a medical professional, but an epileptiform paroxysmal, whatever you want to call it, Jay. You know what I'm saying? So, a 6-second long one that was revealed in a short recording.
Can call something paroxysmal. If you call it epileptiform, that's a medical opinion. That's
then I'll stick with
one step beyond general descriptor.
Thank you for that. I'll call it paroxysm.
Paroxysmal is perfectly fine. It's a description of something that has a sudden start and a sudden stop, and it jumps up double the background activity that's ongoing. If you meet that definition, it's paroxysmal.
Now, before we get too complicated here, gentlemen, now, not, presuming we haven't seen what Jay was saying in the EEG, I think we need to kiss a lot of these things, meaning keep it simple, silly. Sometimes constipation is a simple expression of somatic expression of anxiety, okay? So, before we get too complicated, let's rule out the basics. The other, again, I am not an MD. I am not a nutritionist, but also magnesium deficiency. So just a little magnesium supplement can do wonders for juvenile or constipation throughout the lifespan. So some of these simple things you want to rule out before we get to the complex ones. I always say try the simple solution first, or simplest solution first, and then elevate it. Jay,
if somebody's got a gastrointestinal complaint, they usually don't go to the EEG lab first. I'll say that.
But a lot of people just,
where would you put the cap?
I am wondering how much there's
cap catching. Yeah, okay, we're really digressing.
Is there some overlap between the mechanism of abdominal seizures and abdominal migraines? Because some of the symptoms sound similar, and I'm wondering if there's a similar driver. Top down, vagal or.
In fact, when you look at migraine, you get a high percentage of those that complain of migraine have epileptiform discharges in the EEG and respond well to an anticonvulsant. Topamax is quite often given. It's an anticonvulsant, but it's most commonly given to people with migraine.
Do we know if abdominal migraines are epileptiform? Or is there
I don't know that all of them are, but it's common for people that have migraine as a complaint.
Super common.
Not just abdominal, but migraine, the pounding headache of migraine. And when they look, you have to look at the EEG. If there's paroxysms, they're probably more responsive to an anticonvulsant than they would be to the sumatriptans, the vascular medications. Now, there's a whole bunch of new meds for migraine that have come out, but one of the biggest mistakes you might make for migraine is they're doing Botox for migraine, but it's Botox is not for vascular at all. It's for muscle, and it's risky. You can have migration of the toxin and have a Guillain-Barré like side effect, which is no fun, and it can trigger autoimmune issues. So, not necessarily a great option.
Oh, good Lord. I don't know. I have no idea if this connects to anything, but I was watching a video of one of the dancers on Dancing with the Stars, whatever one of those shows are, getting Botox injections in his armpits to stop him from sweating.
Yeah.
I was just, oh my God, I'm perfectly willing to watch somebody sweat while they dance. It seems like a natural byproduct of the activity. I was like, how bad is it? Is it dripping? I was like, it seemed like a far way to go. And talking about migration, I had no idea.
It's very, very common now. We used to talk, when did this term come out? The male metrosexual. Okay. And all of the new grooming routines. And this is one of them. And I don't know. Our world is getting weird.
You saw the same video I did.
I can see wrinkles and a scar, so
yeah. No, but I didn't know that Botox could migrate. That's interesting. So it's not as localized as people think.
No, nobody shares that.
I wouldn't if I were a doctor.
To connect this back to autism, guys, there's a study here that, there's several that show that women who receive Botox injections suffer reductions to their empathy. And they think that it is directly related to losing the ability to mimic facial expressions.
Bingo.
Exactly.
But it becomes a perceptual. And further, there's a study, I'm going to put it in the chat. It even says that losing the ability to mimic facial expressions reduces muse suppression, which, as Jay has talked about, is one of the primary, and Pineda, one of the primary autism phenotypes.
And I'm going to throw in a huge one here. I've spoken about this before. I jump up and down, scream left, right, and center. Young mothers, okay? In terms of thwarting the ability of a child to read, facial expressions and feel safe. If you are a young mother, never get Botox. If I can be as cancel if you want, you're screwing up the development of your child. And so many of these women do not know this. It's not quote unquote their fault. They are clueless. And I think this is just a horrible issue within professions that promote Botox without realizing what they're doing to the development of children, of individuals with Botox, to the interpersonal relationships, whether it's friendships, whether it's partnerships. You know, that good old bitch face, when your partner always has bitch face, when your mother always has bitch face. I'm not going to be genderist. When your father always has, a-hole face. I don't know.
Just to advocate devils, though. I mean, think about
what are we doing here to our interpersonal relationships under the guise of not having a few wrinkles? I mean, everybody, please, let's get back to aging well, yes, but with dignity, with grace, and not screwing up our interpersonal relationships.
And you've seen the cartoon that is the same exact face: Botox happy, Botox sad, Botox angry, Botox fearful. And the problem with Botox as an actress or actor is it reduces your ability to emote. A neurologist in Southern California, David Hubbard, MD, a very old friend of mine, developed an alternative to Botox that actually goes after the real problem, which isn't really the motor neuron, it's the muscle spindle that holds muscle tone, which is not innervated with the muscle motor neuron at all. So Botox blocks the motor neuron, but the problem is the muscle spindle. And being a neurologist, there's known drugs that are sympathetic blocking agents. You just had to target it. So he wired up a syringe with everything insulated except for the very tip, and you could palpate for the muscle spindle. And basically, if you touched it, you would hear it on the speaker because the person was grounded, and this would complete it, and you'd hear the muscle spindle fire, and that told you you were on target. And you'd give the syringe a little tap, and you just turned off the muscle spindle. So you could literally get rid of the excessive tone without stopping the ability to emote. You still have full use of the muscle.
Very cool.
It's a very expensive approach, and he took it through the second level of FDA trial and sold it, and made enough money to buy the Applied fMRI Center. He bought the Tesla, the Siemens scanner, a 3 Tesla scanner, and had it installed in a building in San Diego with the intention of using it for feedback, not as a standard MRI, but as an applied fMRI installation. And it was a fairly new concept to train the anterior cingulate inside the MRI itself using fMRI. So he afforded that by selling off this approach to a drug company that ends up owning it.
Can neurofeedback improve comprehension? KYM wants to know. Yes. KYM, are you a college kid? Is it midterms coming up?
Comprehension.
Not by next week.
Semantic and declarative memory is related to the alpha frequency tuning. If your alpha is tuned appropriately, you have really good recall, but you have to have it in there already to recall it. You can't just tune for memory and create a memory of something you didn't learn. So,
but they're taking Ritalin. Can we do digital Ritalin?
Ritalin reduces frontocentral theta. It's a dopamine deficiency that's being fixed by the dopamine reuptake inhibitor of the Ritalin, methylphenidate. So it's a good match for frontocentral slow content due to dopamine issues, and that's not uncommon in the ADD population because of the DAT genetics. Dopamine transferase is an enzyme that strips away dopamine from the striatum. So it's like having a leak, and the methylphenidate stops the leak. So you end up having an appropriate amount of dopamine. And
I'm going to take this down a level from Jay because I think we're going to lose everybody with his brilliant mind. But in terms of just piggybacking a little bit, yes, it'll help with comprehension, but you have to be able to get a little bit of processing of the information before you can prove the comprehension. But neurotherapy, 100%. will help with the ability to receive information, process information, interpret information, and spew it back out. You bet.
So there's a discussion here on screen, basically, with a little bit about clearing some interference. And there was a nice study in Salzburg, Austria, on SMR frequency training, and then testing the visual event-related potential. And the SMR training got rid of a somatosensory interference with the visual event-related potential. It cleared the interference, basically. So there are things that can be done to stabilize the brain to cut out some interference, and SMR is one of those things when it's applied in the proper locations and with other frequencies generally inhibited as well. But the SMR training ends up being beneficial for semantic and declarative memory consolidation and sleep as well. So there are good things you can do to assist your comprehension and memory, but they take time. You know, SMR training has a learning curve. You don't. It's not something like a pill you pop in. If it's digital Ritalin, it's a real slow release. So
it is pretty fast compared to most things that work on the brain, though. I mean, as things that make changes in the brain, we make changes in the orders of multiple standard deviations in a few months against the average, population score. That's massive for human transformation. We get blasé about it. We're like, oh well, this person only had a little bit of change in their ADHD, and it took 6 weeks. Okay, whatever. But like, it's still life transformative for many people. And we get, I used to work in traditional acute mental health care for like a long time, where all we saw was just palliative care and suffering and revolving doors. And then neurofeedback, it feels like cheating still. 25 years later, I still am like, it's a
really good point, Andrew. We do take this for granted because we do it every day. So thank you for sharing it that way, because we get comfortable with our own skill set, and we don't know just how badly people are suffering for decades sometimes. And the fact that we can make changes in people in a matter of months, I mean, you think about it.
Months is fast for the brain.
Exactly. It's remarkably fast. Now, to the person who's looking to increase their comprehension and recall, first you have to study. That's a real thing. And neurofeedback will help you and assist you in putting all of that together with more speed and accuracy.
Yeah.
But you still have to do the actual work. You have to read the books, the textbooks. There's no cheat here. It's not going to turn you into a speed reader where you're going to just memorize volumes of material overnight. It doesn't work that way. It's going to increase your capacity to do better at given your own God-given gifts.
This is where the gym analogy is always the best analogy I find. Okay. Yeah. Wherein if you want, a little bit of strength, okay, you want to build your muscles, it takes so many repetitions over so much time to get a certain look or a certain effect, and if you're somebody who has underdeveloped muscles versus somebody who is in a healthy range, who wants to get a little bit stronger versus somebody who wants to become a bodybuilder. I mean, there are all kinds of goals and how far difference in how far we go, but also for what reason. But it all takes time to get an effect, and some of it is like physiotherapy. Again, it's corrective and then it sticks. But the other thing is, if you want to go with the bodybuilding model, you got to keep on doing this, right? And we have, elite performers, whether they're sports people or executives, that are in on a very, very regular basis because they want to keep that high level. But if you are an individual with, basic ADHD, or a parent of an individual with ADHD, we can change the world for that child just enough. We're not changing personality, et cetera, to just make schooling so much more accessible, to make a lot of the things that people are having difficulty with easier. And as Andrew said, we change the world.
Yeah.
But Ritalin is so available in colleges, in high school, and like what's well, yeah, I know, but like
it's not though. There's a psychostimulant shortage actually in many countries and the US. There's many people on ADHD forums just crying about not able to get meds for 2 months straight, and they're hunting around, calling 7 pharmacies, looking for generics, finally finding something.
Selling it?
If they'd only spent that 2 months with us.
I know,
Hey.
They wouldn't have to be worried about their shortages.
They think it's partly because
John wins a point.
Mari, they think it's partly because the DEA has quotas. They have caps for but the other thing is, so do you guys know that I have friends who have personally been prescribed Adderall or Ritalin, but then also benzos to put them asleep at night because they can't go to sleep otherwise?
Yes.
And I also have friends, people that I've known, that they share their dose with their friends, or they sell it, or they abuse it. They do it all at once. They run out, and then they need to go get from a pill mill or someplace they can get it, more of it. And so the Ritalin is not an answer either, is basically.
Yeah.
That's
Valley of the Dolls, the old movie.
Yeah.
So
what happened in that movie? The movie.
That's a very old movie.
Cabbage Patch.
Amphetamines in the morning and Seconal at night. But it's actually a good movie if you haven't seen it. So, but it's old. But so am I.
Yeah.
But that was kind of a movie and a social commentary. But what really, really bothers me are the numbers of MD and psychiatrists who are actually prescribing this as a solution. That really frightens me. The other one that we've just touched upon are individuals who get diagnoses so that they can essentially become drug dealers, meaning they're selling it to their friends or at school. And that's just sad. If we're going there also, I'm sure you're all aware of pill parties. People know what I'm talking about?
No.
What?
Is there one tonight?
Wait, you hear about this? College kids and high school kids, they arrive at a party, they take meds and they throw them in a bowl, and people and people come in just like candy, and they pick something, You'd be surprised
not knowing what it is.
No, it's an adventure.
Wow.
Sounds like Western medicine.
Oh, ding, 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 ding. John,
going to benzodiazepines for just a second, because I'm sure I've had any number of clients on both Ritalin and benzos. Yeah, that's an extremely common presentation, unfortunately.
Wow.
Do you feel that, I read the side of the box, I can read the side of the box like anybody. The side of the box clearly says, 4 to 6 weeks or whatever the number is. I'm making it up. Is there a responsibility on the part of the medical community? I know people shop around for different doctors, but I've had people who've had legitimately, they get the benzo refilled endlessly. I had a woman who was 25 years plus on a benzo. And I'm just wondering what the ethics, anybody's, I'm in the malpractice. I'm just like, sue somebody. I don't even understand how that can happen.
They're moving more away from benzos being prescribed because they know there's problems with benzodiazepines.
Yeah.
And they advance dementia-like changes. It's not all good.
But if we're at a pill party and we're talking about colleges, is
college and high school
still taking mushrooms, is that better for you than weed?
No.
I'm going nowhere on that. I'm going
LSD. Hold on now. We're talking about creating new pathways.
No, unchecked plasticity is not a good thing. You don't need more plasticity generally.
Okay.
And that's a big misapprehension in this biohacking space. People microdosing stuff and taking lots of stuff to jack up their plasticity. You don't generally need more. You need to shape it. And if you need more, meditate or something. I mean, you know, the end goal should not be just lubricating your brain into changing. People get into trouble with psychedelics and non-psychedelics.
Full disclosure, I tried microdosing. And my experience was amusing, let's say it that way. Because you're dealing with a piece of cardboard soaked in some reputable person provided this. But it's literally a piece of cardboard which I'm cutting up with a razor knife, trying to approximate a dosage. So you're already in the land of, I have no idea what I just took. How much? I have no idea.
And nothing clued you in that this was suspicious, huh, John?
Well, no, because
I'm taking away your point.
But this is the way it was delivered to me. So it was a full dose. So I said, well, let me try micro dosing. So I cut it up into 16 squares or whatever. It's this infinitesimal piece. It was ridiculous. But the amusing part was I found myself, because I did this every day, and I'm meeting with clients and I'm chatting and I'm doing my work. And it's just this, reputedly, it was going to be this subliminal boost in my perceptive abilities. That's what I was looking for. Okay. I'm sitting with a client. I'm sitting with a client chatting. You see where this is going already. I'm sitting with a client chatting going,
we'll edit this out in post.
If you drag
you have to edit this out. I'll stop the story. I'm not advocating. I'm not advocating that anybody try this or do it. I'm just telling you my
drag history back to before LSD was considered illegal,
right? And
it was just Owlsley LSD, but there was
I'm that old, Jay.
There's Timothy Scully. Tim Scully basically was the chemist behind Orange Sunshine, and there's a very good documentary about him, the Sunshine Makers. It's Nick Sands was his partner. Tim Scully wanted to make enough LSD to get everybody in the world high on LSD. He created over 7 kilos of it. And God. If you can imagine, since doses are, full-size doses are not anywhere close to that, So, but he ended up obviously being busted. He went to the federal prison for being the originator and chemist and behind it, and actually wrote his own appeal, redid the prison library card catalog while he was at it, and very bright guy. And before he was making acid, he built the sound system for the Grateful Dead. So he, is an interesting character. But he appealed his way out, and he's free and alive and enjoying life in retirement at this point.
Thank goodness for Talibu. Does this mean neurofeedback can help with white matter or myelination in the brain?
It probably can, but there's probably more reliable ways to remyelinate than neurofeedback is the short answer, I think, in the biohacking space. Citicoline seems to have good research supporting remyelination. And there's plausible mechanisms whereby hyperbaric medicine and maybe even photobiomodulation might provide metabolic support there. So plus dietary things. So I would say all those things might help the cells grow that you're training with neurofeedback, but I don't know if we've ever seen a myelination. I can't think of any mechanism with neurofeedback where there's a myelination
There's
impact.
publications that have shown white matter change with neurofeedback.
There are?
Maury Beauregard out of Montreal Neurological, 2 papers. But more current, Dr. Jaime Pineda out of San Diego, were with autism. They did neurofeedback, and they did DTI, pre-post DTI imaging, and the neurofeedback sculpted the white matter in the areas of the training. If you look at the spectra in significant autistic cases where there's delta in the temporal areas, that delta is associated with white matter change. And at the developmental level where you're laying down myelin, it goes off wrong. It's either over or undermyelinated, and either way, it's not going to work. If you overmyelinate, it turns off a neuron. If you undermyelinate, it's not really a high-speed neuron. So the myelin has to be done properly. And if you see the slow focus in the temporal lobe, left side for language problems, right side for the Asperger's presentation, the training gets rid of that slow content. And if you look at the DTI imaging that Pineda did, we would expect the correlation of that slow content dropping down to be what he saw as the sculpting of the white matter in the area.
I also want to add,
Jay, when you say sculpting, for the uninitiated listeners, are you?
If you look at the diffusion imaging image, the spots that you're training ended up having the deviant excess white matter problem resolved.
Okay. Do you think is the mechanism literally just the quote unquote exercise of circuit?
Goodness knows what the mechanism might be.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Fair enough.
The fact that they've observed it is astounding. Even, it wasn't
totally
all that long ago. I wouldn't have expected white matter to be neurofeedback responsive in a way, but I've seen delta suppressed, and that's a reliable finding in the autism spectrum findings that we're working with, and we see a tremendous increase in the function in the area when the delta drops down, the alpha frequency is tuned up. You got rid of beta spindling in the area. When things are tuned up right, you get cognitive functioning that's really, it works.
Right.
And therapies that are oriented towards their disability also start to work. When the neurological turf is ready, then the input in therapy into that area ends up being quite useful.
Yeah, for anybody listening. Sorry, no, I'm just to follow up on Jay's point for 1 second. Just that I think is the important element for anybody to know who's looking at neurofeedback as a therapeutic intervention for themselves or their child, is it prepares the brain for all of what Jay's referring to, all the other therapies that you're doing, the occupational therapy, the speech and language therapy, all of that stuff is going to go more smoothly because the brain is now available to accept the differences and understand how to apply them. Sorry, Mary.
No, we're saying the exact same thing. I'll just piggyback that. No, neurotherapy is a potentiator, period. It sets up the brain for many, many other things.
Which is another reason why you shouldn't microdose, because you'll stop microdosing and start macrodosing without knowing it if you do neurofeedback. Awesome. I didn't finish my punchline. That happen to clients all the time.
I didn't finish my punchline. That's exactly what happened to me. All of a sudden, I'm like, uh-oh. It's coming.
Yeah, exercising your brain makes all kinds of stuff stronger.
It was a little embarrassing.
As Tim Scully said, occasionally you touch a hot beaker and you go, oh, no.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Anyway.
All right. First of all, we all tell everybody here, please check with your primary care physician first, because there is nothing here you want to follow. This is all entertainment and informational purposes only. And the viewers and listeners drive the content. And since there isn't anything intelligent being asked here, I will throw something out there.
But we're going unintelligent.
Consult with your own shaman.
This could transfer over maybe into tomorrow's show, because Jay kind of likes to get in the environment a little bit. Yeah. I saw something, and I didn't know this. Leaded gasoline, do you think that could be behind a lot of the learning problems and all these things that have come up in the past few decades? Yep. And if so, whatever the half-life is, how can you train away, from the lead? Because that goes in your bones, doesn't it?
Sort of mimics
in
calcium.
fact, there's a lot of toxicity that ends up being stored in the body, either in your fat or in your bones. Different materials store in different locations, and there's very few of the things that are out there that you're going to talk about that are going to be good for you. Chlorinated hydrocarbons, nasty or organophosphates, toxic substances, and life is full of it out there.
Yeah.
There was just a settlement, $36 million settlement with a refinery here in the Bay Area that dumped toxic material from 2018 to 2022. So they paid $18 million for dumping shit into our air for 4 years straight. That's a cost of doing business.
Yep.
Nowadays, that's awful.
They paid their fine and they're free to go on. But they were basically just venting hydrocarbons without processing, not being flared, just releasing, and switching the refinery over from refining for gasoline to doing vegetable oil-based diesel, biodiesel, and in that turnover process, they toxified the community. Heavy metals, when you go out to your car and there's kind of a dust on it, that dust would reoccur, and they did swipes of it, very heavy in vanadium, and that's not that common a thing that you run around finding high concentrations of vanadium, other than in catalysts in refineries and things. So they traced back some of the pollution back to the refinery, and that got all of this big investigation going, and they found all this release for a 4-year period. So
thank you, Anthony. I was wondering where my IQ points went.
They said Gen X does have the most lead in their I think it might have been their hair. Yeah.
I sure don't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I used to enjoy pumping gas because I like the smell. I mean, that's kind of scary. It's really kind of scary.
Well, can you get those IQ points back if it is having an effect? Did Jay say that? I don't.
If you're getting lead, it ends up being stored long term. It's very hard to get it out.
Yeah, mercury as well, right, Jay?
Mercury is also very difficult to get out, but it depends upon what form it's in. If it's methylated, you absorb it real deep. Anyway, there are very few toxic substances that end up being good for you, and the direct identification of the method for creating the cancers and so forth are being identified slowly and being denied largely, and like cigarette companies denied. But Monsanto's Roundup ends up having extreme problems with that. They were bought out by a European company just to kind of step away a little bit further from the ownership of the toxicity, but
again,
the liability for it.
Right?
Yeah, I can still buy it in my hardware store.
Yeah,
it's baffling to me. Baffling.
There are a lot of chemicals that are still for sale in the U.S. that are banned in Europe.
Yeah,
and
Canada.
They've looked at the chemical nature of something, and they ban it because it's a problem. And the fact that we don't is a different kind of a problem.
Well, we're free here.
Yeah, you would hope that
it's a freedom question.
FDA and the CDC would end up having some sway based on science, but there's a lot of
God forbid that would.
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness, a good question. Radar Ashwood. I have heard certain people in the neurofeedback community say that you can't train gamma without active electrodes. Yet in my experience, training gamma feels remarkably similar to using the Vilite gamma.
The thing with an active electrode is that the amplification is right at the electrode site, and you don't have as much of a problem with the distance from the computer. You don't pick up as much field effect around it. It's amplified. But gammas, you can see gamma with classic electrodes. That's ridiculous. Now, how you look for gamma is another matter. If you look for it in an averaged data set, you're not going to necessarily find it that easily. If you look with a Hilbert transform, which doesn't look for power, it looks for rhythmicity, you'll be able to see it much more readily. That was the method that was used by Dirk de Ridder and his group, and Walter Freeman III from Berkeley. He passed at about 95 years old, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. Unfortunately, he was supposed to give the lecture, a pre-Brem lecture at the Consciousness Society, but he passed that year, just before their meeting. So,
okay.
Anyway,
nice plug for Vilite. Marie, was Vilite over at the at SMHR SA? What's the acronym in Chicago?
ISNR.
ISNR.
Oh, ISNR. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What you want to give us an update? What happened? Why you were there? Clue everybody in.
Yeah, I mean, just absolutely fabulous meeting. I mean, it's the place where there's a meeting of the minds, right? It's the place. I mean, obviously there are all of the workshops. I shared my research in terms of what we were doing on the Swingle Sonic app to potentiate brain quiet. But it's also, just where all of us kind of sit down, not only share what we know is happening with what we're doing, but also what we think might be happening. And it really sets the stage for new research. It sets the stage for new explorations, experimental treatments, etc. So it's really, really positive in that regard, I find. I never regret going to these meetings. I mean, same thing. Let's give a plug for Susan, just in terms of the brain power that's going to be in that little yacht club. Just absolutely phenomenal. Just, it's not just the talks. It's not just learning about what people have done. It's also where we're going. So Jay, I don't know whether you want to take that a little bit further.
It's been about that long since the last meeting. They shaved me at the last meeting for.
Well, Radar Ashwood said, "Is it still possible to get into the conference?" And I said, "Yes, it is."
Yeah.
I put the link in there.
SassoonCity.com. SassoonSummit.com will get you in to get a registration in.
Yeah.
And that I think there's still a handful of seats, but it's a limited number of seats, and after that, it's all just streaming.
They can look through the window of the bar.
It'll be live streamed into the bar, So I'm wondering if half the audience will just not come back into the meeting room and just catch it from the bar,
There have been issues with that. As a former attendee, I can attest to that.
Anthony, you posted a Jay said.
Yeah, I think I was actually going to ask Jay about this. I believe I've heard Jay say before that gamma is meant to be seen nested in chirps of theta, and it's not really meant to be seen, persistently was the word I used, but that may not be correct.
Yeah. If gamma is persistent versus is seen in chirps, and it's not always nested in theta, it can be nested in alpha also. If you look at it in the sensory areas, you see it nested in alpha. It's content, it's not state. And the nesting in theta ends up being really quite easily identifiable. If you use wavelets, you see it as event-related synchronization, desynchronization, and you'll see 6 bursts in a second of the gamma. and you see that in normals. In high functioning ADD, their gamma bursts are very weak, and in low functioning ADD, quite often a lot of their gamma nests are empty. So the gamma and ADD ADHD is an under evaluated and under treated segment of the spectra. It's actually an important aspect, and gamma that's appropriate gamma, that gamma that's nested, and ends up being insufficient in ADD ADHD compared to normals.
If I can just do a bit of a shout out to newbies out there, please be very, very, very cautious about gamma. Okay. If you don't quite get the literature, get a mentor to understand it more. There's certain aspects of gamma where you want to bring it up to help with certain conditions, etc., and certain things where you are doing harm by bringing gamma up. So, this panel here is fairly knowledgeable and we throw things around, but please, this is one of those ways. Do not play with it. You gotta know what you're doing.
I had a vendor who had a software that was gamma training software, and he was asking me to kind of like suggest a little write-up about it that was favorable. And I said, well, if I write about gamma, I'm also going to write about the pathology, because persistent gamma is associated with pathology. It's seen in seizure focuses. It's seen in dysrhythmias. It's seen in chronic pain, Parkinsonism, tinnitus. So gamma is not necessarily good. It depends upon what kind of gamma you have. Persistent gamma is not good. Nested gamma, now you're talking. Now that's the kind of stuff that you need. So you need to know the difference, and you can't just train gamma up and assume that that's a benefit. Now, photobiomodulation of gamma isn't necessarily training gamma that you're making. You're having an effect on they believe the mitochondrial aspect of the cell. You're getting a mitochondrial boost at a cellular level to the cortex. And that makes reasonable sense. But the gamma, when you're actually doing something with your brain, when a network is formed, gamma is an emergent property of having a network. It's like having a bell. The bell will ring. It's a resonant property of having a network. When you create a network, about 45 milliseconds after the network has formed, you have a resonance of gamma in it.
The question I had about gamma, Jay, the Davidson research on the monks. I mean, we all talk about it, and I haven't read the papers in many years, but it seems like they had an extraordinary power value, at least on gamma. I don't know its duration.
Yeah, what they're talking about is not what we talk about when we come to gamma.
Right.
Either. So Cliff Sarin and Bjorn Watts also were involved with that study, and they presented a lot of work on the Samatha project at UCLA. Their gamma starts at around like 100 to 200, and there's ringing gamma up 4, 5, 6, 1,000 that they're talking about. That's the gamma that seems to be enhanced, and it's not gamma tonic high level amplitude. It's connectivity as well between regions. So we skipped a question though on gamma. Ben asked, I think, why people think you can't measure with passive electrodes. It's a very simple reason, and I kind of agree with it, because I've seen how hard it is to visualize gamma in filtered signals. The 1/f, you have delta as a high amplitude wave. As you go up in frequency, you go down in amplitude for the same energy, and all those layers of all that EEG passes through layers of tissue and gets attenuated. Gamma is often below the noise floor of attenuation in low-key equipment. So you can measure it with non-active electrodes if you have a very clean environment, a lot of density, and you're doing not just FFTs on the signal. But for the kinds of stuff we do in the neurofeedback landscape with passive electrodes and a cheap $500 amp, those things are not getting that resolution, I don't believe. And I don't think you should trust gamma. And most of the early studies on gamma and EEG were attracted because it was isocods they were picking up, not gamma. So gamma is one of these things we have to be careful with saying anything too strongly about, because lots of careers have been like damaged by people making the wrong assertions in literature and having them pulled. So I think gamma is sneaky, and we unless you're an expert in it, you don't know anything about it, basically.
And the other question I had, Jay,
as happened in the meeting in Winterthur, there's a presentation and they talked about gamma, and Furtscheller stands up and he says, 40 hertz gamma, you can't trust, if it's not gamma 2, I don't even look at it. So
Wow.
if you look at the wavelet analysis and you have enough wavelets to actually see higher up into the frequencies, you'll end up seeing there's 40 hertz gamma that's resonant, but there's higher frequency resonance in gamma 2 ripples. There are higher frequency functions that are important and sometimes extremely involved in pathologies. If you want to see a bizarre beta peak, gigantic beta peak up in the 30-something hertz range, find somebody who's having an acute schizophrenic break with hearing command voices at that moment. They're hearing voices telling them to do something right now, and you look on the EEG, you'll see spindling excess beta way up in the 30s, and that it's pathology. It's in the range that people would consider gamma, but not the gamma 2, which is like Furtscheller says that's real gamma.
Why do so many trainers avoid directly training the prefrontals? I found T3 FP1 to be quite helpful. Radar Ash would add.
So frontopolars, FP?
Yeah.
Well, they're noisy for starters.
They're super noisy muscle. Yeah, Mari's got a very good point. They're very hard to train. Also, they're delayed in neurofeedback. Often FP sites, for some reason, produce a second day effect or a third day effect. Mm-hmm. And they're a little harder to get a clean effect on, more side effects.
Can I put that for people who are doing multiple sessions per week? The delayed effect, I'd just be really, really cautious because you could go past where you want to go. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I meant to interrupt.
It's not like people don't train there. The orbital frontal, right orbital frontal work for trauma that's done commonly. The frontal poles are spots that are also seen with a radiation around them, and you don't necessarily have to stick your electrode into the FP1, FP2 area to pick up areas off the front that you're interested in training or tuning. So you don't have to stick your electrode so forward onto the muscle or into the field of the eye movement, subtle eye movements. And slightly further up, AFZ instead of FPZ or an FZ, you pick up enough of the anterior cingulate usually at that without having to go all the way forward. And super high resolution is always nice to end up projecting where something comes from. But with 19 electrodes, we have generally adequate source localization to end up identifying if you've got something wrong with the frontal poles, where exactly we could put an electrode that would end up feeding it back.
What's an example of a delayed effect?
Oh, Pete, do you want to just pause a bit? Because I interrupted Andrew when he was in
the middle. Girl. Everybody's interrupting everybody.
No, I just wanted to emphasize something he said. But Andrew, you had more to say. Do you want to just pick that up again?
Oh, I don't think I did. No, just that the FPs are both delayed, they're noisy, as you said, and they're more side effect prone. Like they're harder to predict the effects, versus like the central strip. I'm a thalamus guy. I like to go down through the thalamus, but hitting the cortex whenever possible. Like the corticothalamic regulation can hit a lot of the brain that's not near the corticothalamic strip. So I always try to find the central manipulation phenomena that works best before I start hunting for spots of cortex to tune.
Yeah. People are pretty connected to their somatosensory cortex area as well. The feel of it is felt sense as opposed to more esoteric areas, which are, well, our language doesn't even describe them well. So, why should we even try? Actually, Joe Kamiya's recommendation for all of us to observe EEG phenomenon and make subjective correlations and try to have group synthesis of the data, so we get some kind of what they at UC San Francisco referred to as biocybernaut, an investigator of internal space. And Jim Hart kind of picked up on that, but that there was a whole group at San Francisco at one point that used that biocybernaut. Anyway, we do have subjective experiences of frontal function and temporal functions and sensory area functions, but our somatosensory we're particularly connected to, and the felt sense of the feedback is usually really quite strong centrally.
All right, everybody, we're at time. Anybody would like to do an Irish goodbye, please do it any time. We meet at the same bad time, same bad channel every Wednesday. Your questions drive the content. Thank goodness it's picking up steam and doing our best. I can only imagine if we had 1,000 people in here. I don't know how the hell we answer the questions.
Well, we don't even answer them now, so hey.
Well, I tell Pete at neuronoodle.com. We do a show on Thursday. Dr. Marie and Jane, whoever wants to tag along. Yeah. And if there's any carryover from today, we'll try to deal with that to have it come out on the Thursday show, and then we'll make amends. And just like VJ says here, he's going to ask his practitioner to clarify. Always check with your primary care physician first. This is for entertainment and informational purposes only.
Are you
everybody? What a blast! We're ending on a high note. Ton of people in here, and I
you
can
get
only
some
wait.
Online viewers.
Yeah, let's keep.
Yeah, we got. We're the number one rule in entertainment, Jay. You know what it is? You got to always leave the stage with the crowd just wanting a little bit more.
Yeah.
Unless when I'm on the stage.
Okay. All right, folks.
All right, everybody. See you next week.
Okay. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye, all. Bye, all. And remember, well, I guess nobody remembers. Let's see.
Upload the
Let's think about what we're supposed to remember.